Daniela, it's no secret that inflation is running, 15%. If you look at loss of purchasing power, you're talking 15%. It's really galloping out of control.
Bitcoin fixes that though. How?
Because it's finite supply and it's got infinite demand and it's a safe harbor, and that's where people are going to protect themselves against fiat money. You can't print Bitcoin. You can print fiat money. Gold supply is not fixed either. So it's the go-to commodity. That's why Paul Tudor Jones calls it the fastest horse in the race. Paul Tudor Jones is one of the first people to come out and say, maybe 2.5 years ago, that inflation was going to be a problem. And this is when policymakers were saying that they were warning against deflation. He was saying, no, it's actually inflation. It's going to become a problem. That's why I'm buying inflation-sensitive assets. And Bitcoin is the fastest horse in the race. And he put 1% of his portfolio into Bitcoin. I believe he's raised that allocation to 5%. Then Michael Saylor, of course, came out and said, hey, the monetary energy of the US dollar is depreciating by 15% a year. That's the true inflation number. Your purchasing power is being destroyed by 15% a year. We're buying Bitcoin as our play against inflation. And I must say, heroically, Michael Saylor could have borrowed money from the Fed and bought back their own stock, and he could have made a lot of money doing what Microsoft and Google and Amazon and all those corporations do. They buy back their own stock, which, by the way, was illegal not too long ago, with that ultra low interest rate from the Fed. You see, when the Fed says there's not much inflation, therefore they're going to keep interest rates low, they're doing that so that insiders can borrow at those ultra cheap rates, buy their own stock, their executive stock options double, triple, quadruple, they cash out, and they make a lot of money. But us who are not in on that game, if we go on our credit card, it's still 18%, Daniela. How come my credit card interest rate is still 17, 18% during the last 5 to 10 years when rates have come down substantially? How come my Visa, MasterCard is not at 5 or 6%, right? Because it's what I call interest rate apartheid. If you're not a friend of Goldman Sachs, you live in a Bantustan, you live in a ghetto of high interest rates, and you're squeezed, and you never get to save any money. But if you're a friend of Goldman Sachs, you get to borrow at 0%, invest in assets, and you collectively are buying the same assets. Those go up in price, then you can use those as collateral to borrow more money and just repeat this over and over again. That's why the wealth and income gap, the wealth gap is so high in America. It's higher now than even during the robber baron era, because of this interest rate apartheid engineered by the Fed, condoned by Nancy Pelosi. And this is why Bitcoin is going to, $220,000 in the short term and going a lot higher as interest rates and the dollar create this insurmountable obstacle for anyone trying to save money who's not in Bitcoin.
How does one become a friend of Goldman Sachs? That's the real question.
It's very easy, Daniela. Goldman Sachs and the US government, it's a revolving door. Look at who runs central banks around the world. Goldman Sachs executives. Who runs all the big banks and all the banking relationships and the Davos crowd and the IMF and the World Bank? Ex-Goldman Sachs executives. It's a revolving door of corruption. I mean, it's the most corrupt country ever in history. If you look at the number of actual theft that's been going on, no country in history has stolen more from the people. Look at the interest rate arbitrage in the pension account. That's $5 trillion has been taken from pension accounts that should be yielding 4.5%, 5% in a normal interest rate scenario to the pockets of speculators in Goldman Sachs. That's a $5 trillion heist. Tell me in history a country that stole $5 trillion from its population. I'm waiting. Tell me. And that's just one of a multiple piece theft that's been going on for decades because of the central banks and the fiat money and the derivatives market and the insiders have collected a protected class of larcenistic, corrupt public officials and bankers that have no pushback whatsoever from the media, from government, or from any country. I would love if somebody in the Canadian government sent down the Mounties to help us deal with this corruption. We need help, world. America's the most corrupt nation in the world. Will some nation help us? Canada, send down your Mounties and arrest these people for us because we're incapable of governing ourselves.
I'm not even gonna go there.
Yeah, why not? You live in America too.
Right now I'm in Canada though, so I could tell you we won't go. All right, I want to get to some viewer fan mail / questions for Max Keiser, who is very revved up today. Max, you're bringing the heat. All right. This one comes from Thomas McLaughlin. He says, Max, why has BTC been acting like a risk asset correlated to the US stock markets lately? And what will it take to decouple?
Bitcoin has always been decoupled. It's on its own vector. It's not correlated to anything. So it started off at essentially zero, and it's heading to be essentially Bitcoin. You have to understand Bitcoin is a 51% attack on the global energy. So 51% of all global energy will be dedicated to Bitcoin, and this will starve to death all fiat money, shitcoins, and gold. And the price is essentially going to infinity because in dollar terms, because the dollar is going to zero. So it's on its own vector. It's not correlated to anything. Occasionally, in any 6-month period, you could look at a chart and say, oh, why is this correlated or not correlated? But over 10 years, 11 years, it's not correlated to anything. It breaks all the rules. Again, as Michael Saylor has said, it smashes all the rules.
Okay, next question from CB. I know in the past you have responded and said that Bitcoin cannot be manipulated, but this is coming up more than once here. He says, does he not believe Bitcoin is now being managed similar to gold and silver?
Well, no, because unlike gold, you have with Bitcoin an impenetrable wall of encryption that protects the underlying protocol, and the demand ultimately is infinite. So Bitcoin has infinite demand, gold does not. And gold also is being replaced by Bitcoin. So gold is being demonetized the same way silver has been demonetized. So in the short term, you have derivatives traders and derivatives markets, and you do have a lot of the games that we see in various markets will have an impact on the short term on price. But if you look at the long-term chart, look at the 10-year chart, you see a very orderly, ascent higher, and that will continue really for during the course of everyone who's watching this during their lifetime. That will be the course of the price. It'll just continue to go up over your lifetime, my lifetime, and everyone who's watching this over their lifetime.
Yeah, this one's coming in from Mark. What are your thoughts on the CBDC and China rolling out their own digital currency? Does this help or hurt Bitcoin in the long run?
The Chinese CBDC is meaningless. It's just another centralized digital offering. It's not different than what they have currently. It's just more centralization. Bitcoin is decentralized. It's the only purely decentralized money ever in the history of the world. And the Chinese centralized digital coin, it is no competition. It doesn't mean anything. Someday China will capitulate and start buying Bitcoin. They're going to pay a lot more for it. They made a similar mistake 500 years ago during the Ming Dynasty when they burnt down their treasure fleet. China was on the verge of conquering the world. Then some bureaucrat got in office, decided that the merchants were too powerful, and they burnt down all their ships. Similarly, last year, China got rid of all their miners. It's probably the worst catastrophe economically for China since they burnt their treasure fleet 500 years ago. It's really, really stupid. They're going to pay the price dearly when they have to come back into the market and start accumulating Bitcoin at $1 million or $2 million a coin.